If you're watching by now, you've probably already seen the AO Mainnet 1 year anniversary video. And there's a lot of interesting things there that I kind of wanted to dive deeper into with Sam. So first of all, Sam, good to see you again.
Twice.
One thing that stood out, and this will be my first question here, is that you've been so heads down building over the last year from Mainnet to the 1 year anniversary that you quit X. So I guess my first question is, do you miss Twitter? Do you miss it a little bit?
I certainly miss interesting things that our weavers post and people, sharing their builds, that kind of thing. But no, I mean, to be honest, I think, and this is one of the things we were trying to say in the video, was like really where Web3 has got to. We must just deliver now. We must focus. So yeah, in that sense of being more connected with the wider community, yes, but it's time to do rather than speak about doing. And so I would even encourage others to do the same.
Yeah, and you're not missing much. You shared a couple of really interesting updates about the broader Permaweb in general. And if I'm tracking correctly, what you were describing was over the past year, you were not just building out AO, a decentralized hyperparallel computer that turns almost every interaction on the internet into its own micro blockchain. That wasn't enough. Several other semi-related, semi-not Permaweb projects came up that you had to tackle during that period of time. I'll stop here. Did I accurately, to some degree, assess the situation?
Yeah, I think that's right. Really, we've built HyperBEAM, the name of the implementation of AO that we created, into a PermawebOS that deals with each of the layers of the stack that is necessary in order to make Arweave not just a permanent decentralized ledger of human history, essentially, but into a living animated web that people can interact with. And along the way, while we were building what we now call AO Core, at least internally, and I guess in our marketing as well, but I think over time we might just drop the core bit. We'll see. Yeah, along the way, we built this protocol that could act as a really good substrate for making each of the services that we need in order to make that web a reality, properly decentralized and trustless. And there were implementations of each of these different sort of layers of the stack, but they were basically centralized or required some trust in the operators. And we've, well, I think somewhere along the line, we just sort of decided that it was time to step up and fill in the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we founded Forward Research, out of the original Arweave team, we basically said that, our mission statement was just what the Permaweb needs us to do, we will just go do it so that it exists. And we started by, building applications on top. That was the idea. At the time, we saw that there was this process where many founders in the ecosystem, they got started and they would, at some point, they would need to raise capital, and then they would be exposed to the sort of necessary distractions, let's call them, associated with that. And that would slow down progress of building. So we thought, okay, first idea, let's help bootstrap people to product market fit, and then they can go, raise venture and all the rest of it once like the core period of building is over. And that can help with growth and all the rest of it. It seemed to make sense. But along the way, we sort of saw that, okay, well, we need that. The first thing was actually a decentralized unit of account we called U back in 2022, I think. And then after that, we saw, okay, the compute engine, we need something that is scalable enough to support Odyssey. And that was what AO came from. And then just practically speaking, because we run the, largest Arweave gateway, Arweave.net, we needed a trustless system where we could give that computation to a decentralized network rather than, running it all ourselves. It's actually quite costly. I mean, it's not, it doesn't cause us any harm, but it does take away resources that could otherwise be spent on just building the firmware faster. So we'd much rather solve that problem. Then we can reinvest those resources instead in building more of the Permaweb. And so we figured that was sort of necessary to make progress on in the last year. And we now got that to the point where, yeah, we're starting to carve out traffic that would previously have gone to arweave.net, or rather the centralized arweave.net infrastructure, and run it on trustless nodes, or nodes that least can be made trustless via all the security primitives of AO core.
So we're talking about accessing Arweave through AO. And more specifically here, when we're talking about arweave.net, some of the functionality you're describing is querying, is uploads, downloads,
Yeah.
all of that. That seems incredibly interesting. And talk to me more about the trustless versus non-trustless. So it existed, but and if you've been watching, you know the view here, which is describe to me trustless in your own words. Like, what does that look like?
Trustless is the worst word in our industry, unfortunately. But it means the precise opposite of what it sounds like it means. It means trustworthy, trustless in the sense of not requiring trust from a user. So a service given to you where you don't have to trust that someone else is going to do their job correctly. It's rendered to you in a fashion where you can trust only math instead. And yeah, we had versions of, many different parts of the stack. So, for example, indexing. There's the big indexes that are used on arweave.net, but they are run by, at this point, just one company, whom we're working with to build the decentralized versions. They're great, actually. But, if that company goes down or were to change their service offering, we're exposed to that. And that simply can't stand if we want a properly decentralized web. And, in the last year, we just sort of, it was really that AO Core was the solution to the problems that we were trying to come up with. The solutions to the problems we had on the compute side. We were trying to make a suitably general purpose system. And the more we went down that path, eventually we ended up in this place where we realized all the things that gateways do could actually be brought inside the compute layer. It's almost like not quite a compute layer as much as like a cryptographic transport layer. There really is no parallel, so there's no nomenclature that we can just borrow. But anyway, we found that we could bring it inside the model that we were building for AO, and then it just naturally extended, well, we should go do that now because we actually have the tools, finally. Like solving decentralized indexing and bundling, unbundling, all of this has been huge resource, time, focus, sink for the Permaweb since we got started in 2019 approximately. Now finally we had the means to solve it, so we just went out there and finished the job.
For average users right now, so is GraphQL one of the current not fully trustless solutions? Or
yeah, you can run your own, or you could run your own Ario node, for example, and there's a couple of other implementations, I think, of GraphQL, which, big up Ario. Yeah. but those didn't run inside a mechanism that could give you trustlessness. So you either had to trust the provider or the provider is yourself. And in that regard, you can make it trustless, but then you really have to run it. What we can do with HyperBEAM, and this actually plugs into Ario's incentive layer, is you can run it inside a TEE. So what happens is, and actually any other AO core security mechanism too, for example, if you ran a TEE node, a trusted execution environment, which so profoundly confusingly perhaps, trusted in that context is meaning the opposite of what it means.
That did a new name, trustless execution environment,
Right, exactly. That would actually be much better.
Yeah.
Well, at least can we just agree on which polarity? Anyway.
Trustless is good. That's what we're saying.
Yes, exactly. I think trustworthy would have just...
Trustworthy is better,
Yeah. Anyway. Okay. So you could run a TEE and you can index some part of Arweave or all of Arweave, and then I can access your node and it will give me back a signed response, that sort of head of the blockchain, if you will, that says, hey, I did this computation and here was the result. And it's signed with your key, which I can, through some other means, verify can only possibly exist inside that trusted execution environment, trustless execution environment that you can't access. So when I get that result, I'm basically my sort of, would you say, the remaining points of trust that I have are first the HyperBEAM software itself, and second AMD. And if those two things are correct, then I know that you can't have screwed with the result that I'm getting. It's fully trustless. And then, once you have that as a basis, you can layer on top of it. Oh, and also you can go to a decentralized network and go find the results that you need. But fundamentally, it no longer requires you to run the indexer yourself in order to trust the indexer. You can depend on other people's services.
So we've talked about the Permaweb like a tree sometimes, right? And it's in different stages. First, you got to make sure something exists. And then, I don't know, did we ever decide, is Arweave the trunk on that? Because
I would say so.
So it needs to exist, needs to be reliable. And then I guess like what the third tier is fully trustless, trustworthy, whatever you want to call it. And so the trunk is Arweave, and it's effectively been made that way, right? It's checked all of your three boxes. And now we're talking about the different branches that are continuing to arise from the Permaweb. For example, the indexing querying layer. So that existed, was reliable, and now we're taking that last step to making it fully trustless.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Where would AO be on that branch right now?
Depends which way you use it.
Yeah.
So for distributed compute, I would say that it's fair to say something like there is a mode where it can be trustless apart from liveness right now as it stands today. Although it wouldn't be so hard to make it properly decentralized, trustless, and without that liveness sort of caveat. But the way that you do that right now, which is why we haven't just done it, is it would be relatively slow. That's using Arweave's core consensus layer as the essentially delegating liveness to Arweave. Yeah, so there is a way to use it that is like trustless computation, but not trustless liveness guarantees, unless you're willing to do a tiny bit of implementation and take a slowness hit, let's say. That's on the smart contract side. On just pure computation, you don't have that same question of liveness. Like using AO as a function as a service layer. So, you've got a WASM container or something that you want to run, or a Lua script in response to people's HTTP requests. There's no liveness concerns there because it's a distributed network is sufficient for that. Yeah, so it kind of depends on the task. And another example would be GraphQL, right? You want to ask a HyperBEAM node, hey, what are the results you have for this query? Then you don't have that same question of liveness. Liveness is really about like, how do I determine and who helps me determine what the tip of this computation is right now? And the question is always, okay, what happens? It's like the centralization question. Are there any single points of failure there? And most of the way people deploy AO today, there is some scheduling node that if that scheduling node goes offline, well, you would have to do, there are mechanisms, they're not very easy to use, but to move it to a different machine. And they're not right now trustless. You couldn't, as the user, go and do that. The operator could move to a different machine. The user couldn't do it of their own accord. Okay, so not a very simple answer, but to make it simpler, largely last bits in progress, I would say.
Okay, so that's one other branch here, a big, huge branch, almost a separate tree. And we got a couple more branches coming off the tree too, some of which I believe have been referred to as financial primitives.
Yeah.
So for folks out you like me, who when you heard financial primitives, you thought, what does that mean? So these are sort of like the economic engine of the Permaweb, if you could say. So for example, the Permaweb index, of course. There were dexes associated with the Permaweb. There was even the AO Mint. Those are all the financial primitives when you think of them, right?
Yes, I would say so. There's others like the token blueprint that people use, certain other components like that, but that largely covers it.
And we're also kind of fleshing out the different stages of those branches right now. Like, for example, the Permaweb index, I know that even though we didn't quite mention it in the AO Mainnet anniversary video, that's been also underplayed as well. What have you been doing there?
Yeah, so Permaweb index and AO Mint, both of those components, I think, had a pretty rough version 1. We kind of agreed with people in the community's feedback that, those needed work, particularly the Permaweb index mid and the fair launch processes associated with it. So we've rebuilt the engine for those from the ground up, made it so that they can be run in real time rather than doing a single large mint each day, and made the computation much, much, much more efficient. And we have this really elegant, boy, the math for it is reasonably complex. Yeah, but it's relatively elegant the way it came out. Structure that allows us to just do this in real time. So you have some assets in your wallet for even only a few seconds. You should accrue AO tokens, and you should do so live. So when you go and see your balance, it should update live without any transactions on that process being required. So all of that was really re-engineering it from the ground up to solve those problems that I think people in the community and also we were not super happy with.
So net, this man has been a wee bit busy. I see.
Well, not just me, but the whole team. Yeah,
the whole team. And I want to go back to the Arweave functionality on the tree. So you mentioned it just now, PermawebOS. And you like that name because it sort of encapsulates what HyperBEAM has become, a one-stop shop, Permaweb in the box. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Now, are we officially going with PermawebOS as an official name here?
I think we're on the fence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious what people make of it, with the asterisks that every single time we ask for feedback on names, everyone will, not everyone, about 70 to 80% approximately will instinctively go with the existing name.
That's true.
And I can understand that, but the vast majority of people that will use this software have never yet heard of the software. So, take it with a sort of pinch of salt, but I'm curious for feedback on it. I think it does easily describe that this is not just AO, the compute layer AO smart contracts that we call generally AO processes. This is something much, much wider. Now, it all runs AO core, so there's that. It's like AO core is the orchestrator, if you will, for this decentralized machine, and then a HyperBEAM node, or maybe we call them PermawebOS nodes. Yeah, they are the sort of, the engines, individual engines in this giant decentralized machine.
Well, he's not on X, but if you've got feedback, you can ping me and I'll relay it to the man in question. And what we're describing here, you would so far call the back end of the PermawebOS.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, it's honestly, a lot of these things don't have easy names. There's like, at the moment, HyperBEAM OS, if you want to run HyperBEAM inside a TEE, that actually boots as an operating system. Like you boot up the machine and it goes straight to running HyperBEAM. There's no other services on it. So that's an OS. But at the same time, also, inside HyperBEAM, AO core is kind of like a CPU, I guess, in a way, or a language for CPUs to speak, perhaps. And so when you write programs with it, or when you achieve a task one way or another, building a path, and like we have in the demo video, that's kind of like an operating system too. And it handles tasks and stuff. So I know the word operating system has become massively overloaded to the point of being not so useful. But I think that's partially why we might just want to say, well, it's called the PermawebOS, the whole thing, top to bottom, and it's in one box, and you can run it. You can run it either as something you boot directly into, or you run it on top of Linux or Mac or whatever you want on your personal machine. That actually might just solve some of the complexities.
It's the Meta OS,
Meta OS, yes.
So if, let's just say that's the back end, even though, asterisk is here. The front end was teased in a way that really caught my attention for anyone who knows that vibe coder guinea pig right here. What is it about the Permaweb that lends itself to vibe coding? Even though I think we need to sunset that term because it's rapidly just becoming coding. What is it about the Permaweb in particular that meshes so well with this new trend?
Yeah, this is one of those funny things where, I mean, we've been sort of theorizing about what we originally called the data-centric OS. Funded some people to sort of build it out, and they help with other parts, but didn't really address this, what we see as a huge opportunity. Yeah, and so shout out to Greg from Longview Labs, who's building AO DevBot.
AO DevBot.
Yeah, right. this seems like one of those things where it just lines up incredibly, incredibly well, really like remarkably so. So if you're vibe coding an application, like you don't want to run servers. Okay, well, the Permaweb, like the whole idea is you don't run servers.
Mhm.
So we got that covered. And also, you don't want to like, you could build single player applications, right? Where either the user is only using their own data or there's just no extrinsic data at all. Okay, but the like number of things you can build there is pretty limited. So if you're not going to do that, you're going to build a multiplayer application. Now you have this problem of like, what's in the database, right? You can vibe code it, but like you can't vibe code or vibe hallucinate, at least in a way that is, you say, people find entertaining and meaningful, all of the content inside something like a social network. Well, you have this huge problem, like where's the data going to come from? And all of the existing potential avenues to get that data have been locking down the edges of their sort of walled garden for many years now. I think it's really noticeable that one of the first things that Elon did when he purchased X was massively, massively jack up the prices of the API. It's essentially a walled garden. You can't get that data out now and build on top of it. The Permaweb is really the only place where you can go and get an open content lake. Open content lake, open infrastructure that you can just build a sort of static UI or like a set of files, drop them onto our drive or have the AI upload them for you even, and the application just works. It's pretty remarkably great fit, I think.
It is a remarkably great fit. My first question when we were discussing this a couple of weeks ago was, I can easily see how you can get some fun game type apps from vibe coding, so to speak. More robust, more complicated projects. I'm particularly thinking of like monetization models for them. I mean, do you really feel that's doable with the Permaweb and vibe coding, like the type of complicated projects that in years past have required big teams with serious degrees, etc.?
This is an interestingly complex question. Okay, so there are many angles to this. I think one of them is that the capabilities of the models have increased profoundly over the last year. Like if we were having this conversation last January, it was a totally different game. So the scale of things that the AI can usefully help build has really, that scope is much, much wider now. So the first thing you see is, oh, wow, every person can build an application now. That's super cool. The next, thought after that is, oh, wait, but if, one example is I built an app that required a heart rate monitor via the flashlight. You like put your finger on the flashlight and it measures your heart rate in JavaScript. I suck at JavaScript. I'm truly atrocious.
It's like a regular flashlight, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's got the flashlight and then it uses the camera and then it measures the differences in the intensity of the color. Yeah. Anyway, there's no way I could have handwritten that in JavaScript. I give it to the AI and the AI just spits out, it just spat out a version that worked on the second try, I think. And my role here, other than telling it, please give me the heart rate monitor, was like explaining the bug that I was seeing. Like I was just the passive purveyor of, I had no idea what was going on. I was telling the machine what the machine was doing, and that was it. And it fixed it. And there used to be tiny industries around these, like, we say niches of useful small applications. Well, they're all dead now, right? Like, I think where we're going is eventually a world where if you want the heart rate monitor, you just ask for it and it just makes it for you on the fly. So then where will the value accrue? Well, it's certainly not to the purveyors of 89-cent heart rate monitoring apps on the Play Store or whatever, but like it's not going to go there. That's not the way it works anymore. So the dynamics of value accrual will be very, very different. And also the dynamics of teams. Because the consequence of that, if the applications only take you like 10 minutes to build, what we're going for with this sort of front end of the PermawebOS is, first goal is it should take no more than like 10 to 30 minutes to make a cool experience that is novel on the Permaweb. and you should not see a single line of code, and you should not need to know how any of the infrastructure works. It should just work out the box. I think that is achievable now. So if we have that, well, how valuable is it? It's definitely not zero. And I think there's a lot of ways we can add sort of fun, small monetization to it. But the notion that you need to like have a large crew of people working full time to make something like this happen now is definitely wrong. You don't. And so this world's going to look very, very, very different, I think. Yeah, it's gonna be very, very interesting.
Yeah, what you're describing is such big ramification. That's a whole separate video for the rest of the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the main questions I always get asked on Telegram and X, and I do read your comments, is a roadmap. But from what I'm hearing right now, you effectively outlined the list of priorities in front of you. It almost seems like the question is, okay, like what order do we put them in? Is that accurate to say?
I would say so. I mean, last year we made a really large amount of progress in totality, but across many different vectors. And so I can feel people's pain, and I understand it. I see it every day. But like smart contracts, just those basic things like swapping stuff on DEXs on Mainnet. Certainly our progress there has not been as fast as we would want it to be. But at the same time, we've also implemented the rest of the necessary layers of the stack to make it trustless and decentralized, which also needed to be done. There's a question of like which things have like slight edged out priority over others. I hope in the video that I imagine most people, if they're watching this, have already seen at this point. We laid out, so here's where we're going, here's why we think it's useful and important, and here's all the different vectors and what comes next, which is basically just this sort of bug fixing on the back end and this front end component. There's sort of more, I call them tactical questions of like, what does it make sense to prioritize first? So for example, the GraphQL and the gateways, currently that costs money. We could otherwise use that money to, employ more people to help build the firmware faster. It's probably strategically viable and sensible to prioritize that, potentially even over, at least in some senses. I mean, with engineers, it's always a little bit more complex than this because it's like, to what extent can you, throw more engineers at the problem and the problem just go faster? It doesn't really work like that. So there's nuance, but certainly logically looking at it, you would see that, okay, making it so that we can get more engineers building stuff faster might be better actually than having people be able to swap NFTs in a way that's really seamless. As much as we want that to be achieved as fast as possible, it's probably wiser to make sure that, we can put the resources in the right direction first. And the same could be said for the front end of the PermawebOS, making it so that we can bring the Permaweb to a huge amount of people without those people having to be developers. I mean, of the people watching this video, the Permaweb community is great because it's got a lot of people that are real builders and doers and creators. But I would still expect that only like 10% of the audience here is a developer. So making it so that the rest of the 90% are empowered to build stuff on the Permaweb is both eminently possible and clearly going to be a sort of pro-sum value creation event for the Permaweb. And so that is also a very sensible strategic priority. I wouldn't want people to interpret that as we're disinterested in these other components. It's just in the scope of things, I think we make progress on many different vectors at once. And one of the things we wanted to clear up with this video is it's not obvious to me how many people really understand that the scope of the project is not just building like AO smart contracts for fast token exchanges. It's much, much, much wider than that.
Yeah, it is certainly much larger than that. And to your point, during the transition of some of these services from what was working with centralized to trustless, and no moo mois here, how does that transition play out to you? Is there going to be anything that you think we should keep people posted of? Any transitional information that you think people should be aware of, etc.?
Yeah, I would say, We've.net will essentially remain functional as it is now from the point of view of users. Over time, you'll probably want to change that We've.net domain to something else, but ultimately the way it's serviced in the backend will mean that it doesn't really matter. You can do that at your leisure. The one caveat to that might be if you're an extremely heavy user of GraphQL, you want to pay more attention to this transition period. But otherwise, largely shouldn't notice it.
Yeah, so follow the AO of the Computer X count and join our Discord if you want to keep posted of any information that comes down the pipe. And speaking of the video, I do kind of want to end this conversation on more of like a meta philosophical note, which is we were talking in your office a couple of days ago, and we're saying, what percentage of the crypto industry is really building to build versus just kind of speculative noise. And I won't share the exact percentage, but it was high. And we looked at each other and said, like, well, why are we still doing this? Like why when there's so much associated with what could be called Web3 that does not seem particularly genuine, thought out, non-token speculation, why do we keep doing it? And so I kind of want to toss that question back to you again right now, when you look around at the landscape and there are some projects that are just not building to last. What motivates you to do it?
I guess I don't see my motivation as remotely related to what other people are building. I think I've had some realizations recently that, and this is sort of, as I described earlier, we've been in this process of, we started with, okay, no one had built the unit of account for early war. So we went and built that, and we sort of bit off more and more of the responsibility of getting the Permaweb built over time. And so the sort of how we build the Permaweb has shifted, but the why or what is still very much the same. I think it is possible to have a cyberspace where end user rights are guaranteed. It's self-evidently preferable. Someone's just got to do it. And yeah, my only changes of thought there over the last few years have really been, I would say, becoming more pessimistic that just because everyone is doing it means it's going to actually get to the shared dream that we have. Like, there's a lot of things that people in Web3 are doing, or projects that I don't really think are going to get us there. There was a sense that in that conversation you and I were having, that is all progress good progress? Like, there are certain things in our industry where, more people building stuff. At some point, we would have said, of course, that's just self-evidently good.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah.
And it is probably almost self-evidently good. It's like generally great news, but the details of that, like, okay, how likely is this project to actually build something that is truly decentralized, that is trustless, and then subsequently, when other people build on top of it, we're going to move towards the Permaweb that we want to see, not actually create sort of, let's say, linchpins of points of weakness, I suppose, that expose the whole ecosystem to problems if they don't work out. And I think we're sort of meeting reality where it is on that one. That, well, part of the sort of project of building out, decentralized implementations, or implementations that can be run in a trustless way of all of those different services for the Permaweb is like, you can go and you can reuse these components however you want. But now we have a backstop. Now the Permaweb will happen. Whereas otherwise we were waiting for others to fill in those gaps. And as I tried to explain in the video, there are some real and often understandable demands on builders' time and attention that moves them away from actually shipping these things in a way that, even if they wanted it to, I would say has integrity with the mission, something like that. Like, I really see as a lot of well-intentioned founders, particularly in like the wider crypto industry I've met over the years, who've had a very difficult time building something that was an honest implementation of what they set out to build in the first place, just because there's so many other pressures. We decided we would just go do it. So we'll see what happens.
I love it. Big things coming in 2026. Sam, I always learn something talking to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.